Bro, what the flip are these grade boundaries? And in previous years, I thought these were bad. You need 217. 217 for a flipping 9. That means if you got 72 out of 80 in all 3 papers, you get a grade 8. Bro, what? I saw that the A-level grade boundaries were horrendous. Didn't expect the GCSE ones to be this bad as well.
There has been a lot of talk in the last 24 hours about grade boundaries, but unfortunately most of it shows a complete lack of understanding. I've watched this particular video a few times and I can't actually make my mind up. Either this creator simply doesn't understand the process of awarding grades, or they're simply just getting angry at them because it's easy content to farm. Either way, I want to clear up a few things and hopefully help more of you understand the facts around this. Let's take a look at what else he has to say.
Genuine question, how many people in this country got a grade 9 in maths?
Well, we actually know the answer to that question. If you go to Google and type in Edexcel grade statistics, then click on the first link here where it says GCSE, you'll be taken to this page. This has the grade statistics for every single exam series. If we click on the top one for 2025, we're given the provisional figures and you'll find these under mathematics. This shows us that 17,821 students are currently being awarded a grade 9, which is 3.4% of all of the students. This is not much different to last year, where there were 18,560 students, which was about 3.5%. It's also worth noting that the 2025 figures will still likely increase further. If you look at the provisional figures for 2024 and compare them to the real ones, you can see that they all increased. Presumably, this is a result of the review of marking process where some students' grades increased. The main point to take away from this though is the percentage of students being awarded the top grade from 2024 to 2025 hasn't really changed very much. In fact, it hasn't changed very much over time since this series of exams were introduced in 2017. You can see that it's always been between 3 and 5%, and in fact if we take out the years that were affected by COVID, it's really similar. What this shows you is that in fact if anyone has cause to complain about the grade boundaries, it's those students that did their exams in 2018 and 2019, where only 3% of students were awarded the top grade.
All of these marks are relatively similar, and then you've got this 20 mark increase there. Who is genuinely making the grade boundary?
Well, of course we know that the grade boundaries were set by exam boards, a team of senior examiners with considerable experience. I think the creator is trying to suggest that the grade boundaries ought to be back down near 200 marks. Well, what would be the impact of this? Let's take a look. If we bring back those provisional figures for 2025, and look at the difference between these two figures here, that shows us that roughly 7% of students were awarded a grade 8. If we do the difference between the grade 9 and grade 8 boundaries, we find there are 31 marks where students were awarded a grade 8. If we assume that students' marks were distributed in a linear fashion, we can split this 7% into 31 marks, which gives us roughly 0.2258% of all students awarded a grade 8 at each of these mark points. If we're going to change the boundary to 200, then all of the students who score between 200 and 216 marks will now have their grade 8 promoted to a grade 9. This is 17 different mark points, so if we multiply this percentage by 17, we get an additional 3.8% of students being awarded a grade 9. So instead of there being 3.4% of students getting a grade 9, there are now 7.2. So the graph would look like this, which is clearly ridiculous because the proportion of students achieving this grade would now roughly double.
Who do you think is going to be sitting this exam? When I was doing my GCSEs, I was struggling to get a 9 with these grade boundaries. Never mind the grade boundaries here. And the worst part is, you got a grade 9 in previous years. You'd still be in the midpoint between a grade 8 and grade 9 now.
Unfortunately, that's unlikely to be true. If you got a grade 9 in previous years, you'd probably get a grade 9 in this year as well. The fact that the marks have increased simply shows that the paper was easier to do, especially at the top end. Quite simply, if you were in the top 3.5% last time, you'll probably be in the top 3.5% this time too.
So the teachers would probably tell you, you can't get it remarked.
I'd actually be surprised if anyone said your paper would be remarked, since papers are not actually remarked anymore at all, there's just a review of the marking. If your school or college is suggesting to you though that there is no point in having your paper reviewed, then I would trust them on this. It's worth noting that if your marks were to increase, that would benefit your school as well, as their figures would look slightly better.
I've just realised how cooked the people who sat their GCSEs and A-levels this year were. Like, imagine putting hours and hours of work into revising and revising. You get your results and you see these grade boundaries. Like, imagine getting a result you were happy with and then you see the grade boundaries. And you're thinking, if in previous years I sat this same exam, I would have got a grade 9. Do you know how angry I would be?
Well, unfortunately, this anger is misplaced. The idea that you would have gotten a grade 9 in previous years when you got a grade 8 this year is unlikely to be true. It shows a lack of understanding of how grades are awarded. Now, I'm going to simplify the process slightly, but it's easiest to think of awarding grades as a ranking exercise. Imagine we lined up all of the students that did the exam in order of the marks they scored, with the most marks on the left and the least marks on the right. We then draw a line where the top 3.5% of students are and award all of those a grade 9. We then award the next 7 or 8% of students a grade 8, roughly the next 7 or 8% of students a grade 7, and then we carry on and we award all of the grades like this. This distribution has been roughly the same each and every single year, and this is actually the best way to think of what your grades mean. If you got a grade 9, you're in the top 3.5% of students. If you got a grade 8, you're in roughly the top 10% of students. So this idea that any other year I'd have gotten a 9 is just untrue. In any other year, you would have sat a different paper, which was comparatively harder, you would have scored a lower mark, and probably still got a grade 8 if you got a grade 8 this year. I know that these are particularly difficult pills to swallow for some people, but it is the reality of the situation. Ultimately, if you got a grade 8, you're in the top 10% of all students in the country. You should celebrate this and be happy with the result that you've achieved. Most students would be overjoyed at getting a grade 8 in their exam. I've also seen this ridiculous graph posted of the grade boundaries. Now, there are actually a few things wrong with this straight away. The grade boundary in 2023 wasn't 199, it was 203, and in 2022 it wasn't 203, it was 194. And in 2021 there weren't even exams in the summer, the schools awarded grades to the students. There were exams in November, and the grade boundaries weren't 197, and not all students sat those exams, in fact very few did. This graph is also incredibly misleading due to the vertical scale. This is something that would be taught in statistics. This scale looks like it starts roughly at 190, which gives the impression that the grade boundaries have shot up more than they actually have. The correct graph with the correct figures would actually look something more like this one here. Another lesson in not to trust everything that you see online. So in summary, the grade boundaries haven't been changed to somehow make things unfair for you. I do understand why people have looked at the grade boundaries and thought about it in this way. It's much easier to assign any disappointment or blame to something outside of your control, such as the examiners who set the evil grade boundaries, rather than something that was in your control, your performance in the exam. If you got a grade 8 and you're disappointed, just remember you're amongst the highest performing students in the entire country. You should be proud of achieving so well, and don't let that ruin the rest of your summer before school starts once again.